Hello everyone. So in this video we are reviewing one of the ugly child in the Olympus's 35mm film camera lineup. Ugly by my standards, at least. That is the Olympus OMPC. This is also called OM40 outside of United States, but in USA it's called OMPC. I don't really know what PC stands for. But this camera is kind of interesting on its own, despite its ugly looks. Okay, so I am just gonna go over the features a little bit with you guys, and then maybe you can make a decision on whether you should buy this camera or not. And this copy I have here is actually not in full working order. The meter is actually kind of off. So everything else works, but the meter is off. I don't know if someone would be able to fix it. Otherwise, this camera should work perfectly as a full manual camera using a dedicated light meter either on your phone or a handheld meter. Okay, so we're gonna start from the top of this camera. So this camera, I think, came out in the late 80s. This is kind of like the last generation of the Olympus double-digit cameras, which is kind of their prosumer level camera. That's designed for ease of use, and they also have some less advanced features, but actually not for the OMPC or the OM40, because this one actually had all the really cool advanced features built into the camera. It's a full plastic construction. The top is plastic, back plate is plastic, even the bottom is full plastic, and they kind of try to fool you with this dual tone like paint. So under the black paint, they actually had a copper colored tone. So if you wear off this black paint, that copper tone exposes, and people would think, oh, this is actually still like, you know, a brass camera. But it's not. It's the same thing that Minolta did with their X series. It's all fake plastic with dual tone colors. Okay, so there's nothing metal about this camera, at least exteriorly. And it's actually quite light with the actual lens removed. Like this camera probably weighs, I would say, around 600 grams, give or take 50 grams, fairly light. Okay, so on the top of the camera, you have your standard shutter release right here. You cock the shutter, you press, and it releases. Right now I'm in manual mode, so I was doing bulb. I can use a quick shutter for you guys to listen to the shutter sound. This is what it sounds like. And if you go to a slower shutter, okay, so it sounds pretty average, I would say. Nothing spectacular, and it's fairly quiet. It just, the sound of the shutter just doesn't inspire confidence, if you know what I mean. So, and over here is the film rewind button. So once you finish a roll of film, you just press the little rewind button, and then you'll be able to rewind using this little knob over here. And once all the film is rewind, you lift this knob, and the back door is popped open. And that's when you take the canister of the film out of the back of the camera. Okay. So the basic operation of 35mm. And over here you have a self-timer button. So with this button activated, and if you press the shutter, it flips up the mirror. And when the mirror is flipped up, it counts down to about 10 to 12 seconds. And then it takes a picture. So the cool thing about this self-timer is it's actually able to do a mirror lockup. So if you're doing macro work, you could use this as a mirror lockup. The downside is the time is 12 seconds. Okay, so that's kind of like a long mirror lockup if you want to use it for macro. But it does have a mirror lockup once the timer is activated, which is quite nice. Okay, over here is your exposure compensation dial. And let's see where the ISO goes. So the ISO goes all the way from 25. And the crazy thing about setting ISO on this machine is you have to turn this dial to a certain degree and then turn this ISO. So it's like a multi-step process setting the ISO, okay? But it goes all the way to 3200 from 25. So plenty of choices. And the cool thing is this one also supports DX coding. So if you lift this up and you go here, it automatically reads from the DX code on the film. So you don't have to worry about setting the ISO. And the downside is if you're using the DX coding, you can't use exposure compensation. So I guess when they use the green color, it's kind of meant for, you know, new users, amateurs, or beginners alike that doesn't know how to do proper, you know, exposure compensation when you are measuring, when you are taking pictures of, you know, a bright subject or a dark subject. Okay, so that's kind of the quirk they have, but they do have all those options for you guys with a knob over here that's fairly easy to set. Over here you have your standard hot shoe sync. I believe it supports fast high-speed sync, but quote me if I'm wrong. I don't know because I don't have a the 280 flash to test from Olympus, and quite frankly I don't use flash on film cameras. So yeah, don't quote me on that. But you have a hot shoe with at least 2 extra contacts besides the hot shoe release over here. On the left side, of course, you have your film chamber opening function over here, and film rewind knob over here. Over here on the left side is your mode dial, classic Olympus mode dial. You turn this to the top to check your battery level. And if the battery beeps, that means the battery level is kind of low and you should change it fairly soon. If it's a constant beep, that means your battery is good. Over here is the P mode. In P mode, you don't have to do anything. I think you set your aperture to largest, and then the shutter speed is taken care of by the camera automatically. So, and also the aperture is taken care of by the camera as well. So you don't have to worry about any of those settings. Over here, you have your auto mode, which is contrary to popular belief, it's not fully automatic. It's actually aperture priority. In aperture priority mode, you set your aperture to a certain setting, and the camera takes care of the shutter speed setting for you. So any shutter speed you set here doesn't matter. The camera is just going to meter through the lens and then does a exposure based on your aperture, the aperture that you set, and the shutter speed the camera determines is best for the scene. Over in the auto mode, you can use exposure compensation up and down to expose for the super bright or super dark, but that's how the auto mode works. And in the manual mode, you have full manual control. However, it does have some limitations because in the manual mode, the meter in the camera tells you the correct shutter speed you should set based on your current aperture. However, it doesn't give you the readout of your current aperture nor the shutter speed. So you really can't, see where you're at until you take your eyes off the camera and then look at the shutter speed that you set. For aperture, it's fairly easy. I would always just go to the largest and then, go clip by clip because there's only, limited amount of clicks from this aperture. But the shutter speed is kind of hard. There's one button that I didn't mention, which is the ESP button. So this is kind of like your matrix metering button. So if you turn the ESP mode on, which is this little green sign pointing to the top, it turns on the Olympus matrix metering mode, which takes into consideration of some of the areas on the edge as well as the center. It's gonna, of course, use the center as the most important part to do the averaging, but it also incorporates and takes into consideration of different zones. which is kind of like the early stage of the matrix metering, and at least this is what the Olympus calls. You can use this mode in the program mode and the auto mode. When you have this on, it's going to default to matrix metering on the subject that you point to. If you have this turned off, it is going to default to central weighted metering, which is still, by standards, is going to give you 90% of the exposure correct. Okay, granted, if your camera's meter is accurate. Okay, but that's kind of like a cool feature that's on OM40 that you're not going to find on the lower generation, the OM30, OM20, or OM10 for that matter. So only OMPC have it. Again, in the United States, the other cameras are called OMG, yeah, and OM something else, whatever. So that's something cool about the OMPC, which is this matrix metering mode. And again, the camera have full control, but this camera is fully electric, so electronic. So if without any batteries, the camera is not gonna fire. It's not even gonna fire in the bulb mode or the flash sync speed, the default flash sync speed. No, it's not gonna work. I'm gonna show you guys. So I just removed the battery, and right now shutter is cogged, and I'm gonna fire the camera, and this is gonna happen. Okay, it's gonna lock it up here, which also shows a very cool metering pattern, the off-the-film metering pattern from lots of Olympus OM cameras, besides the manual ones, which they use for off-the-film metering, which is a really nice feature and gives very accurate results. So now the camera is pretty much screwed up. So if you're in the field, if you're in the market buying a camera like this, and you see that the shutter is all the way up, and the seller says, oh, I don't know what's happening, the camera's not working, it's not firing the shutter, most likely you just need a fresh set of batteries inside to bring that mirror down, especially if it's a electronic model of the Olympus. It's designed that way for safety reasons, but as you heard, as soon as I remove or put in the new battery, the shutter works again. And of course, the viewfinder is actually fairly nice, even though this splitting mirror splits some of the light onto the bottom for the camera's metering system. The viewfinder is still fairly nice and bright. Okay, so it's very easy to use and very easy to focus. It's not the brightest viewfinder, less bright than Minolta cameras of that days and age, but it's bright enough for general use. Okay. So that's pretty much about this camera. Inside here, in the film chamber, you can see the DX coating contacts over here. If I do a exposure on the bulb, you guys can see that metering mechanism over here. It's a silicon blue cell light meter, which is a fairly new technology, fairly accurate and very fast responding. That's why the light meters of the 70s cameras or the late 70s and early 80s cameras are quite accurate in terms of light metering capability. Okay, on the bottom there's pretty much nothing there. You have some contacts for the motor drives, but I don't think anybody uses motor drives nowadays. It's super big and bulky, and it's just too heavy and doesn't make any sense. Okay, so that's pretty much about it for this camera. And at the very beginning of the video, I said this camera is not fully functional because the light meter is off. So it doesn't meter past 120th of a second for some reason. I don't know why. If I would know the cause, I would probably try to fix it and try to use it as a backup. But other than that, I think this is actually, despite its full plastickiness and the ugly rubberized material, it's still a very capable camera. Okay, so if you're a amateur, if you're a beginner film photographer, you want to get into film photography, and you do find a OMPC/OM40 for sale online for a very good price, less than $50, and if the seller says it's full working condition and the meter works fine, you should just get this camera. Okay, because it takes excellent pictures and it's actually using a fairly advanced zoom metering system. but it definitely doesn't have that coolness of the classic Olympus OM single-digit cameras. Okay, look at this beautiful OM1. They all does the same thing, and probably OM1 does a lot less. But again, I would pick the OM1 personally over the OMPC, simply because the design aspects of the OM1 just personally makes a better camera for me to use. Okay, so if you guys have any questions or comments about the OMPC that we reviewed over here, feel free to ask me in the comment section down below. Otherwise, I hope you found this review video helpful in helping you making a decision on whether you should buy the OMPC from Olympus or not. And if you did find the video helpful, please do hit the like button or subscribe to my channel. And I should have more similar videos coming out for you guys. Thanks again, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care.